This spiritual awakening happened and my lifestyle just disappeared overnight. So I lost all of my close friends. I'd ring people, no one would ring back. I'd hear that all of my mates had been out to the pub and to football and things, but I hadn't been invited to those things. So, because of course, all I wanted to talk about was spiritual things all of a sudden, because that was my new life. And the people I was mixing with, were still in the old world of not being spiritual at all.
Welcome to Gizela Infinite Love podcast. Today I have a very special guest. Well, my guests are always special, but Andy, you're special. So it's Andy Porter, a psychic surgeon. And to start with, Andy, what is to be a psychic surgeon?
Yeah, so hi, Gizela. So it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to it for the last week, which is always nice. So, it'd be good to talk. So from my perspective, psychic surgery, again, conjures up the old image, I think, for most people, really, of, people performing spiritual operations, really, on someone in their normal flesh, in their normal body, using a scalpel and kind of taking things out, blood and bits and things. So that's the kind of image of psychic surgery, I think, from the past, certainly. So that in the Philippines, there's lots of people that used to work there and perform what they termed as psychic surgery using a scalpel to make a real incision in someone's flesh and take negative things out. So obviously we're in the 21st century now, so things have evolved slightly, really. So we don't do that, obviously, because
you don't carry a knife like I'm going to cut you.
No, basically, no. I just have a pair of hands now, which do the same thing, actually, interestingly. So the way that I kind of perform psychic surgery on clients that I actually work with in person, one-to-one, is obviously enter meditation, put my hands on them, and then basically my spirit guide Chen, who's a small sort of Chinese-looking gentleman, basically, quite humorous, and he's quite amusing. So
I know that. We'll have a chance, hopefully, to talk with him as well. But
yeah, which will be good. So he basically comes in, takes over my physical body in a kind of spiritual trance mode, and then he performs psychic surgery on that person's etheric field. And obviously the etheric field is a kind of complete blueprint replica of the physical body in a different vibration. So the etheric field isn't the physical body, it's a body that vibrates just outside of the physical body, but has all of the same components and same things. So when we manifest disease in our physical body, that disease is also apparent in the spiritual etheric body, effectively.
So you only do it in person?
I do that in person. We also do it remotely, so we can do remote psychic surgery, whereby, again, Chen and his team actually basically visit the client, if you like, and do the same work on their etheric body. So there's kind of two modes that we work in. If I'm working in person with someone, obviously I'm talking to them, put my hands on, so there's a lot more tends to happen in that way. If it's remote psychic surgery, then obviously the spirit guide and his team, Chen, visit that person and make the same changes to the etheric. And I think for me, it's the beauty of working in this way, really, is that you're not contained anymore to seeing people in person in front of you. The spiritual team effectively can work on anyone in any part of the planet at any time. So time and space isn't a restriction from that perspective.
It's a construction from our minds and our matrix, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I find it interesting that sometimes when I do it, my guides say, for instance, avoid sun for a couple of days, or have more of this kind of food, not that much of other, or rest more, or whatever. And usually they explain that the psychic surgery is actually a surgery and requires certain procedures as the physical one. So does it relate to the way you work?
The same type of concept, really. Obviously, the spirit guide and his team are removing and changing things in your etheric field, and then the things they take away from or remove from the etheric field, those vibrations obviously move back into the physical body over the next sort of 4 to 5 days. So again, quite often, we kind of encourage people to, again, drink moderately, exercise, drink water, the same sort of things as if you'd had a proper operation. Of course, with psychic surgery, there's no cross-contamination, so you don't have to worry about blood contamination, contaminating instruments, diseases and things that
And
happen.
it's in the comfort of the person's house, right?
Yes, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah. What are the most common surgeries that you do?
So from my perspective, so rewinding sort of 20 years ago when I started to do this, I used to see people in person, only in person really, and obviously they would come with a variety of different physical conditions, different diseases, that type of thing. Most of my work now is we sort of work on the spiritual clearing of the etheric field. So we're engaging more now with people that are hearing voices, schizophrenia, that type of thing. So basically clearing negative attachments from people's etheric fields. And those attachments basically can put intrusive thoughts in people's mind, can control them in a negative way, create problems with the family. So there's a lot of negative entities as we describe them that exist.
So that's pretty much related to the spiritual spirit release therapy.
The same type of thing as spirit release therapy. Yeah, spirit release therapy, the concept being that a discarnate spirit basically can attach to a human person, and that attached discarnate spirit, someone who was alive and obviously is now dead, can basically intrusively change the way that person thinks and change things in their life, change their personality, change their food habits, their food choices, and generally mainly encourage substance abuse, which seems to be the biggest problem from our perspective, really. So if you have an attachment, a spiritual attachment, that attachment is going to try to do the things that person did when they were alive. So if they were a drug addict, they will encourage that person to start taking drugs, start taking substances, and basically guide them in a kind of negative way. And as that person's vibration comes down, their etheric field perforates, therefore there's more holes in their spiritual protection. And of course, this then opens them up to more spiritual attack, really. So then we see sort of negative entities, interdimensional parasites, those sorts of things start to attach to that person as well, and obviously drain them of energy.
Yeah. Do you find it connected with some sort of ET, whatever you want to call it, presence as well? Because that's a common perspective and questions, at least that I have. So I pretty much want to listen to your perspective.
Yeah, So I think we see all of those things really. So the whole point of the Spirit Release Academy that myself and John O. Webster have set up is with a view to train therapists, basically. So existing sort of mediums and hypnotherapists, those sorts of people, to actually identify and work through the techniques that we used to identify what's in someone's etheric field that's influencing them in a negative way, and to clear and remove those things. So that tends to be, again, discarnate spirit, people that were alive and are now dead. Obviously, entities, so negative entities. So I sort of see them as gargoyle-like creatures generally, the sorts of things you see on the tops of churches, really. So most people that have negative influence, that are hearing voices, that type of thing, more than often than not have these negative gargoyle type entities attached, and they're kind of feeding them from their energy. So they exist on that low vibrating negative frequency, and they basically feed off us.
So I have sometimes I listen to people say they don't believe this, that's nonsense, and if that is actually happening, kind of it's the person's fault, because you are what you attract what you are, and you are what you attract. So how do you connect with this, or how, better said, how do you respond to this kind of questioning?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Gizela. It's one that, I mean, I was that person. So if we rewind, I'm like 54 now, basically. When I was 30, I didn't believe in anything spiritual, anything religious, ETs, the whole lot. I thought everyone that believed in those things just, was completely bonkers, basically. So that was kind of me. But obviously I had that experience in my life. So I experienced these things connecting to me, infiltrating my sort of thought form, my thought space in my life. So I kind of know they exist because I've experienced it. But obviously people that haven't experienced it, they would be right to be very skeptical and assume that they don't exist. But of course, when we work on people, lots of clients every day, and then we obviously see the feedback that they feel better, their thoughts are clear, they have more clarity, anxiety goes overnight, depression goes. So when we start to look at the feedback from the people that we work on, that's where, I kind of see the proof basically that this works from that perspective. And of course, I'm obviously a medium, so I can connect to other entities and energies. So I actually have conversations with these things. I used to have a lot of conversations with pretty demonic entities that had a very low vibration, because we'd be removing them from a person and they would actually speak through that person to me. So I've had a lot of conversations with what we would term as demonic entities, basically. And generally, they're...
What would, in those cases that you talked with, what was the main message?
So the general outline message is that they're pretty intelligent, really. We see ourselves as intelligent, but basically we're not intelligent at all on the kind of grand scheme of things. So we're like tiny children playing in a kind of playground with, very evolved species that have been here for thousands of years, and they exist in a different vibration outside of our purview. So we can't see them, but we can use telepathy to talk to them. And that's what I've found, is that talking to them, it was very clear that their level of intelligence generally is well beyond ours as a species. And of course, they effectively know how to manipulate us. So they can find your worst fears in your mind and bring those up. So I used to see a lot of imagery, the things that, terrible imagery would come up into my mind, almost like a horror film, really, that creates fear. And as soon as you see those images in your mind, a bit like when you're asleep and you're living a kind of a sleeping dream, and it's a horrific dream, and your heart's beating and you're sweating and all those things are happening, they can kind of construct that emotional feeling immediately in your mind. And it's very hard for us to kind of quell that and push it back down again and remove that fear, because that's the way we're kind of built. So these entities, a lot of them are very clever, and they know how to manipulate us as a species, basically. But they're very interesting to talk to.
Yeah, well, interesting, and some sort of kind of frightening as well. But to do this kind of work, fear is something that you push aside, and you have to be very grounded and very connected with your team and allow the work to be done. I know that but so when you say, or better, when you hear, oh, it's the person's fault, and they're not vibrating high, or they did something, or they're a bad person, is really how it works, how these kind of entities attach to someone?
Yes, I think when people say it's someone's fault, I mean, generally, there's a reason this thing happens. So if we look at kind of small children and babies that are organically protected, we come out of the womb with a spiritual protection. So most small children and babies are pretty protected. So as we move into adulthood, we start to do things like drinking and drugs, and we start to experiment with Ouija boards or pendulums or spiritual occult tools, basically. And that seems to be where the problems happen, because obviously we're changing our vibration, we're changing our thought process and that type of thing. So for most people, again, that we deal with, they don't really understand what's happened to them, because they've obviously, been living their life, and then suddenly they start to become anxious or hear voices or have very negative, intrusive thoughts, that kind of thing. Or they notice their life just goes into chaos. So when you have these types of entities attached to you, your life moves into a very negative space, because they exist in a negative frequency and they feed off your negative fear-based frequency, as you say. So I don't think it's anyone's fault per se. It's choices that you've made that put you in that position. So I mean, I know for me, when I had my first spiritual experience,
that's what I was about to ask. What happened to you?
So yes, I mean, I was going through a difficult time. I was going through a divorce at the time. I had 2 small children. I just met Jane, my wife, my current wife now. So we've been sort of married for 20 years. So all those things were happening to me, and there was a lot of chaos in my life, basically. And then effectively I moved house, which was the catalyst at the start. So I moved into what was quite a new house on a new estate in the UK. And then things started to happen, basically. Started to see shadows under the doorway at night. I started to get goosebumps when I opened the door and walked into the house. Things started to move. I'd lose my car keys. Things would move around the house that I knew I didn't put them in there. So living on my own at the time, so I knew there was no one else that could be orchestrating these events and doing these things. And that kind of happened for a few months, and then things really...
sorry, at that point you were living alone, so nobody else could be doing that.
Yeah, so it was just me in the house basically. So I had quite a big house, four bed house. So it was just me on my own. So
the negative aspect of it was the divorce and all the pain and all the troubles that it gets. You were not drinking, you are not taking drugs, you were not doing that kind of other.
No, so drinking really. So I was drinking alcohol, not more than I probably would have drunk anyway. Particularly, I wasn't really doing anything to excess. But I think from a mental perspective, I was in a pretty dark place really, and sort of struggling to kind of hold my life together as all of these things changed around me quite quickly. So I think for me that was the catalyst. And obviously this house, as it turned out, later on I found out this house was on a ley line. So I took dowsing rods to the front door and they opened up and you could see there was a pathway straight through the middle of the house. And obviously ley lines, as we know, spirit travel ley lines, basically. Yeah. So effectively I'd moved into a house that was on like a spiritual motorway, effectively, which I didn't know at the time. And of course things just got worse really quickly. So
you were in your 30s, you were
31.
Not a believer, then that started to happen, and then what?
So everything got worse, basically.
Help me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought I was going mad. I did really think I had some mental problem. I didn't reach out for help because I knew that if I went to the GP, the doctor, I'd probably end up in a box very quickly. Yeah. So I knew that wasn't an answer. I had a professional corporate job. I was working for a mobile phone company as an IT professional. So I was going to work, coming home, doing my normal job, trying to keep things on track. But day by day, the whole spiritual side of things just seemed to get worse so fast, really. I didn't know where I could go because the only place I thought I could possibly turn to was a church. And I'm not really religious. So I thought it would be hypocritical to walk into a church and say, help, because I needed help, basically. But luckily, as happens in the universe, effectively, I was obviously in a relationship with Jane, who I'm now married to, and she works in a hairdressing salon in Launceston in Cornwall. And one of the people that came in to have their haircut was a psychic. So, of course, they got talking, and Jane said, my partner's having terrible spiritual problems that he thinks no one else is experiencing this, but he thinks this is what's happening to him. Are you able to help? So, because of course everyone around me thought I was just losing the plot because of the experiences that I was going through at the time.
Yes.
And the stress and things, really. So
the help came from that woman?
Yeah, so I spoke to this lady, Christina, phoned her up, explained what I was experiencing in the house, so shadows, horrific dreams at night, things moving around the house, that sort of thing. So she said, I'll just perform a spiritual clearing on the house and you. So anyway, she did that, and literally for about a week, everything was totally fine. So I thought the problem was resolved. And of course, my mental state started to change. I started to feel happier. I felt more confident walking into the house, and everything was good. And then it started to go back to the same way it was before, but this time worse. So there were worse things were now climbing into bed and touching me in places they shouldn't be, really. Oh. And I was leaping out of bed and screaming and shouting.
Yeah.
So I got to the point where
first it got better for a week, then it got really worse.
Got really worse,
yeah.
So I mean, I dreaded bedtime. I dreaded going to sleep because I just knew that I'd be attacked effectively by things that I couldn't see and I couldn't perceive them. But I knew they were there because I'd started to do things like the bedroom had a laminate wooden floor. So I bought casters for the bed and put the bed on casters because I was sure that the bed was moving at night, which sounds incredible, really. But one night I woke up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was looking at the back of the wall. And I realised the foot of the bed was up, like a foot off the floor. Oh. So I realised that something had lifted the bed up. I couldn't see anything, and I was quivering with fear, basically, and screamed, put me down with lots of expletives. So the bed crashed to the floor. I spent the rest of the night shaking in the bed with the duvet up over my head.
Oh my God, I imagine. I cannot imagine.
I didn't know what I would see, basically. So I was just fearful of seeing whatever was in the room because I knew it was pretty negative.
Yes.
So in the morning, when I eventually woke up and peered out of the duvet, I could see the casters on the floor, and the bed had moved to the right by like a foot or something. So I knew this was a real physical thing happening to me.
It was not something happening in your mind. Yeah. It was not a mental question.
No.
Yeah.
So and
So
there were
at
other
that point,
things.
what kind of help? You moved from that house, you moved from your country. What did you do?
Well, that was the thing. So I started to spend time away from the house, and so I'd stay at my Jane's house. I'd stay there, and everything was okay for a while. And then things started to happen in her house,
Oh, jeez.
basically. So I kind of realised. So she started to experience some of these things with me. So she would feel the room go cold. She'd start to have bad dreams, and she said, whatever's happening is around you, and you're causing it effectively. Even though I didn't know what that was, of course, at the time.
Well, not a good thing for a relationship that is starting, or even one that is already in place.
And of course, I look back now, Gizela, and of course, that was the whole point, really, is that all of these terrible experiences I had was designed to kind of, push me into a very negative place. And obviously to stop me working, because I had that relationship with Jane not carried on, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now for the last 20 years. So I firmly believe.
If you're alone and sad and with another problem, you can question yourself much more. You go to a negative state, even like really bad, and then you open even more space, if I can say like this, to whatever is out there to be doing their thing. Yeah. So who helped?
So basically, again, I got back in touch with Christina, and then another guy, I was pointed at a guy called Brian, and he was a psychic surgeon, funnily enough. So he did what I do now. So I went to see him. He explained, look, the negative aspect is effectively targeting you for some reason. We need to teach you how to protect yourself. I can clear you. But every time I got cleared by people, within a week or something, everything came back. So I knew that wasn't going to work longer term. So I started to read books on the occult and spiritual things, and I started to basically be trained by Brian. So I'd just go and see him for a couple of hours session. I'd pay him, and he'd basically teach me principles like spiritual protection and things. So I started to get a handle on the fact that it wasn't me going mad, which I did think was the case. I realised I was being hunted from some type of entities that were very negative, and they definitely didn't want me continuing to exist, basically. And that kind of happened for probably 2 years. So when I look back now, it was probably the best training I could have had to do what I do.
Oh my gosh. I get what you're saying totally. I have to say, yeah, I get it. But we don't wish that.
It's a bit of a difficult journey to traverse, really. So
a lonely one as well.
It was very lonely, and I think they say, don't they? People say, the spiritual path has to be walked by yourself, and it's a lonely path. And I've sort of lost all of my friends. So the Andy before spiritual stuff, I was quite popular. I had a lot of friends. We football, pub. I was just a normal, what I considered to be quite a normal guy. I had a professional job. I was earning quite a good decent amount of money. So I had quite a good lifestyle. And then this spiritual awakening happened, and my lifestyle just disappeared overnight. So I lost all of my close friends. I'd ring people, no one would ring back. I'd hear that all of my mates had been out to the pub and to football and things, but I hadn't been invited to those things. So, because of course, all I wanted to talk about was spiritual things all of a sudden, because that was my new life. And the people I was mixing with, were still in the old world of not being spiritual at all. So I spent, again, quite a few years feeling quite ostracized by most people because I couldn't have a conversation with anyone about the things that I wanted to talk about. And of course, that then, Gizela, and leads you into a new group of friends, new people, so your life starts to adapt and change. And obviously, Jane went through the same thing. She was with me. Lots of her friends distanced themselves from her because of me, really, because they found me quite difficult to deal with and talk to, and they were frightened that, if they spent time with us as a couple, these things would then start to happen to them. So, yes. You become a bit of a pariah to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's really difficult to tune into some subjects like this one, and people get scared. Yeah,
and it is scary. It's a scary place.
But then if it happens to them or someone that they love, family or something, they need help. Then it's the other way around. Oh, Where are you? Who can help me? Help me, please, right?
Well, that's the funny thing, actually. So obviously, I obviously learned I went to lots of meditation groups, courses, learned to do trance, did Reiki, eventually Chen came through my last Reiki session. The lady that was taking the course, Anne, said to me, I've got a Chinese guy here called Chen, who's very small, long hair, and he's saying that he'll be working with you from here on in for the rest of your life, performing psychic surgery. And I had no idea what she meant. I'd never heard of psychic surgery, didn't know what she was talking about. I couldn't see this spirit guide that she talked about. I just, went home thinking, okay, it was a nice Reiki course. I enjoyed it. Now I'm going to, look into.
You went home thinking, well, she's weird as I am.
Yeah, I mean, she was slightly weird, obviously, but I was in that same place. So, two weird people together kind of makes normal to a certain degree.
Yes. Oh, it's fun to talk with you, and very, very productive. And this is a kind of a message, because people get trapped and then life starts to get into chaos, and being alone, it's one of the worst place that you can be when you're living or experiencing something like this, because you really question yourself. If you're mad, if you're crazy, if you did something wrong, how bad are you, and if you deserve it. And you may end up doing things like at the end of the line. And
yeah, and to be honest, I'm quite happy to say I got to the end of the line. I got to a point that things were leaping onto my bed at night that I could see the footprints of. And I had one particular night that I'll never forget. I was, fast asleep, and I basically felt this huge weight on the bed, like it was like a massive cat had jumped on the top of the bed, basically. And then I couldn't breathe. I could feel something around my neck, like a hand, and I literally couldn't breathe. And I was screaming in my mind to let go and all sorts of other things. And I actually thought I was going to die. I really thought, this is how I'll be found, basically, like dead in bed. And then I put a thought out to Chen and to Archangel Michael and to anything positive, spiritual. And as soon as I put the thought out, this thing had gone. And I woke up quivering, and I looked up over the top of the bed, and I could see these huge depressions of these feet. And I thought this was real. And this was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I rang Jane, woke her up and said, look, I've been attacked.
yeah,
Something's tried to kill me. And of course she just laughed and said, yeah, okay, it's just another bad dream. And I said, no, this is real. And I took a photo. I tried to take a photo of the bed without disturbing it, where the footprints were. And I kind of realized that there are some pretty nasty things out there that can, they can connect to you physically and do pretty bad things to you. But again, we don't talk about it, and it's not really brought out publicly.
it's not a cool conversation, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And getting to the beautiful, wonderful aspect of spiritual beings, the woman said, you're gonna start working with Chen. And what happened? You went back home. Oh, this is strange. But then what happened?
Yeah, so then I basically enrolled on a kind of meditation and trance course, effectively, with a very well-known psychic medium who was on TV. So I went to his course and started to work with him. And then in meditation, this Chinese figure started to appear in my mind, said that he was Chen. Like, I could see his face, all of his features, everything. And we started to talk via telepathy. And he said, right, you need to learn to be able to talk to me properly. So for about the next year, I continued to go to this meditation group and class and do trance things. And then I started to drive to work and talk to Chen whilst I was driving to work, because the drive was about an hour. And then I kept turning the radio up louder and louder, so that it would try to distract me from talking to him. So it sort of taught me to have that connection, even when there's lots of background noise. I could still have that conversation, talk to him. So over the course of a year, it turned out to be a really good way to develop that really strong connection to your guide, basically. So even in a crowded room with lots of noise, I can still hear him like he stood next to me.
Yeah, instead of blocking the noise outside and go into telepathy and have a conversation like we're having here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the same as being in the same room as someone. So once I managed to develop that aspect of things, obviously I started to then, he said he wanted to work with people and on people. So then I basically had a shed in the garden, just a regular wooden shed that was quite small, just put a couch in there. And then people started to come. So people would tell people that, they've got this problem or that problem, and they'd come. I'd have no idea what would happen. I just put my hands on, Chen would come in, take over, then he'd start speaking through me to them and talk about their problems and what he was going to do. And then, of course, there was lots of positive outcomes from the things that we did. So more and more people started to come. And then Chen said, right, we need a website. So he was always pushing me, basically.
Yes, I get it. Well, and let me say, so I have my team, and when we met and Chen said, well, I'm going to be working with you as well, I was really surprised. And I got to experience his sense of humor. I have a class on Codes of Light. I teach Codes of Light. And it was that weekend. It's Saturday and Sunday, and that weekend I could just laugh and ask, like, stop, because he has such a wonderful sense of humor. Well, it's playful, but while working, and that's very interesting. Yeah, well, I didn't experience that before with another being that works with me, but this one had a different frequency, a different vibe, and what's really interesting. How is your relationship with Chen?
So he's a funny guy, basically, but obviously everything is done with intent. And so over the last probably 10 years working along with Dr. Terence Palmer, I started to focus on the hearing voices, negative thing, clearing people, removing negative entities, attachments, demonic entities, that type of thing. So that was the area that I felt drawn into, even though it wasn't one that I particularly wanted to be in, particularly, but Chen took us down that road because that's what he wanted to do things. So he's kind of built like a big team up behind the scenes now in spirit. So for me, like every morning, this is what I do full time effectively. So I stand in the shower.
You left corporate and you dedicate to this.
Yeah, so I don't have a normal job anymore. So this is my job. So spiritual work is effectively what I do. So back in November, so I've always been trying to get to the point of doing this full time, but to try and do spiritual work full time and pay all the bills and mortgages and things can be quite challenging because, it's up and down and you're never exactly sure if you're going to get clients or not get clients. But for me, things started to change quite dramatically to the point that I couldn't do both. So I was struggling to work 9 till 5 and then start to do spiritual things in evenings and weekends, and the demand just continued to happen.
Do you notice any difference in the demand or in the type of demand that you have now? Like I would say since 2020, because everything shifted so much, the energy and the separation between, like, the duality, the very good and the very not good. Do you notice any difference?
Yeah, so from our perspective, the demand has just gone up exponential, really. And that was the whole point of, I was talking to other practitioners, and obviously I'm quite friendly with John O. Webster. So, we obviously see each other quite often. And we talked about the concept that as Terry passed away, so Terence Palmer I'd been working with since 2011 or something, I think, basically doing spirit release type training. And he went around the world talking about the work and that type of thing, presentations. He was very involved with the medical establishment and psychiatry in terms of how people hear voices and why they hear voices and the fact that there's a spiritual reason. So I was working with him, and obviously
plenty of times it's not the medicine, the pills that you drug people with that takes care of whatever, because it just makes them go even more.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to every coin, isn't there, Gizela? So I think for some people the medication may help. I'm sure it probably does, but there are some people the medication doesn't really help. And if it's a spiritual problem and not a mental health problem, which is where the distinction needs to come in, if it's a spiritual problem, then it needs to be fixed spiritually, and that generally tends to be attachment problems that spirit release therapy can address. And of course, the medical establishment can't address a spiritual problem, and obviously the spiritual aspect can't address mental health problems.
Yes.
So this is where it gets difficult, really, because when you have a client,
a fine line,
some clients, it's pretty obvious to me that they have a spiritual problem. They're hearing voices, they're intrusive, they haven't really done drugs. You talk to them about their life, and it's a normal type of lifestyle. Then you've got other people that have been in the mental health situation for a lot of their life. They've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or some type of personality disorder. There's a lot of substance abuse, drugs and things in there. There's probably a lot of abuse, most probably sexual as well as physical abuse. So when you add in those types of things, those problems can attract negative spiritual attachments. So we can remove the negative attachment. Terry used to call it cleaning the wound, basically. He would say we would clean the wound, and then that person would have to go to hospital to have the mental aspects, worked on from a therapy perspective. So the way that Dr. Palmer would describe things, and he wrote a book called The Science of Spirit Possession, which is a really big, thick, scientific book designed for psychiatry-type people, very academic people, to explain, in his opinion, how things work and what happens. And that's the differential point, really, is that there are spiritual problems that can be resolved really quickly. Within an hour, we can fix a spiritual problem. And we've actually got a YouTube video of a soldier that we were working with. And he'd been in the UK mental health system for 20 years, basically. Came back from Bosnia, was hearing voices, anxiety, depression, tried to commit suicide quite a few times, very difficult life. And he contacted Dr. Palmer and said, look, I've heard about you guys. I've tried everything else. I think he'd had electric shock therapy and all sorts of things.
Oh, my goodness.
So, he'd really been through the mill. And obviously he was, quite a broken person, really, but a really nice guy. So, Terry said, look, we're going to run a workshop in the UK. Myself and Andy are going to basically demonstrate this process. So would you like to come? We'll pay for you to come down from Northern England on the train and a hotel with no guarantees of anything at all. So, we'll try our process, our technique, see if it works. If it works, it's going to be great for you because you're going to go home with voice clear, no voices at all, no intrusive thoughts. If it doesn't work, then you're no different to you are today, and therefore all you've lost basically is a weekend of your time, effectively.
Yes.
So this guy came down from North England. We explained what we were going to do. He had no idea of anything spiritual at all. So he had no idea what we were going to do at all. So basically, we went through our spirit release therapy technique. I sat with him, immediately could hear a lady talking to me, and there's lots of other people in the background. So these were people that had died, and she explained that a bomb had gone off in a street in Sarajevo or somewhere in Bosnia, I think, or somewhere in that region. He was in the immediate vicinity. So these people all basically died immediately in a huge bomb blast. Didn't know they were dead, really. So they left their physical body, and then this soldier came walking down the road, and they basically were frightened and connected to him, and they were connected to him from that day onwards. And of course, eventually he could hear them talking. They would have conversations with him, and they were angry and fearful and that type of thing. And of course, that was the problem.
How did he feel after the work that you guys done?
So basically, we connected with him. I had a chat with these people. We asked Chen and his team to come in and to clear them, to move them off, to disconnect them from his etheric field, move them back into different words, but heaven, spiritual space, different frequency. So that happened. And then within about an hour, he went and sat outside in the coffee area. And we had a photographer there, a guy called Ben, basically from Viral Films. And he interviewed him. So unbeknownst to me and Terry, we just left him to be on his own for a bit. So Ben interviewed him and said, how do you feel? What do you think happened in that process? And he said, it's the first hour of my life that I've not heard a voice. So at that point, he was absolutely ecstatic that he'd actually had freedom from these negative voices for an hour. And then that carried on for the rest of the day, obviously. So, he was worried they'd come back, and he was saying, well, what if I hear voices? How, do I answer them? Do I talk to them? And we were saying, no, you must. It's all about protection now. You've got to do your own spiritual protection. Don't connect to anything you hear. So we didn't know if it was going to work longer term, because this was a real live, difficult case. But Ben went to see him basically in Northern England about a month later to video him, and he was still voice free at that point. So Ben documented the fact that in that sort of 2-hour session, we basically resolved his problem, because it was a spiritual problem and not a mental health problem.
And do you think Chen has a message for us? What can he add to this conversation? What can he introduce people to, especially the ones that are non-believers?
Yeah, non-believers are great. I don't have a problem with non-believers, because that was me, basically.
Yeah.
So anyone that's skeptical, I think, great, be skeptical. And it's really good to be skeptical. And it's good to keep that space until you experience something that you have to then, review and find out about. So for me, You know, I went on like a 20-year spiritual journey, basically, from the experiences I had. So
So
it's good.
you weren't a kid up and down the hill. I'm gonna be a psychic surgeon.
No, and even when Chen told me I was going to be a psychic surgeon, I still said no because I wanted to go back to a normal life. And Jane
Yeah.
used to keep saying to me, Jane said, "When do we go back to our normal life? They're the same as when we met." And I kept saying to her, "Look, I'm just going to do this course, and then we'll go back to normality," which was not spiritual, obviously. But of course, my appetite for spiritual learning, teaching, understanding just continued to get bigger. And I felt like the more I learned about the spiritual things, the wider everything gets. So,
Yes.
so of course, the less you know. So
Okay.
effectively, that journey never ends, basically.
Okay. Do you think Chen has a message for us?
Yeah. So do you want me to get Chen to come in and you can talk to him direct? Because that would
Okay,
be,
great.
because I know, I obviously assumed that's what we would do. So he's kind of ready to go, effectively. So I'll just basically do a quick meditation, and obviously you can talk to him and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Good day to you. My name is Chen. I'm Andrew's principal guide and surgeon. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation to this particular conversation. I do so look forward to having the opportunity to engage and to talk to people like yourself. So for me, it's a very prominent and perfect way to engage with people.
Thank you, Chen. So appreciative that you accepted this invitation. How can someone that is hearing voices, feeling strange things, thinking that maybe is getting crazy, have a first help? What can someone like that, what can that person do and have immediately a first help?
Okay, so it's a fantastic question and very articulately asked as well. So thank you for that. So from my perspective, someone that's hearing voices, having negative, intrusive thoughts, that won't have just happened. So their level of vibration will have gone down. Everything in the sphere that you exist in is vibration, basically. So if we look simply, vibration obviously could be positive or negative. The more positive, obviously the better. The more negative, obviously the worse things are for people in their lives. So when people go through difficult experiences, as we discussed earlier with young Andrew, or have issues with substance, that type of thing, or some type of abuse in their life, of course their vibration starts to go downwards. And then the spiritual laws come into play. So like attracts like. So the lower your spiritual vibration, the more negativity you will attract into your life and negative people. So you'll start to notice negative things happen to you. Bad things happen to you when you're driving the car. People shout and wave their fists at you, that type of thing. So your whole life degenerates into a negative spiral, causing anger and fear, both of which, of course, are negative vibrations. So when someone's experiencing these types of things, it's very difficult to get out of that hole without help. So there are two avenues, really. So the first thing is to obviously start to engage with spiritual protective techniques and principles. So starting to engage in the concepts of meditation, where again you connect to a different realm, you change your vibration through meditation, and you can follow documented and guided spiritual protection meditations. And then, of course, you have physical things that you can do in and about your person and your property. So sea salt repels negative, low vibrating entities and energies. So you can basically sprinkle sea salt around your property, around your door thresholds, like they used to do in the old days. People used to be much more aware of spiritual problems years ago. And of course, the Eastern bloc of countries are very adept at doing some of these old rituals and things. So sea salt around your bed, sea salt around your property helps to stop negative entities traversing around your property and house. Again, amulets, so people can connect with and wear different spiritual amulets that provide some type of protection. Obviously, there's the concept of space clearing, so you can use incense and other vibratory plant-based herbs effectively to clear space in your room, in your home, in your car, those types of things. But ultimately, if you have a negative attachment that's attached to your etheric field, all of these things will basically fail to detach it. So what you need is spiritual help. And this is obviously where, from our perspective, we have a huge team now in spirit of different entities. So extraterrestrial entities that come from different star systems. Myself, we have teams of discarnate people. So people that have been alive in the physical body that now exist as discarnate entities without a physical body. But we are expert in removing and clearing negative vibrations and detaching negativity.
So a professional help.
Yes, professional help is the place to start. But as you and Andrew said earlier, that's a starting point. So once we clear someone's etheric field and we bring them back to a position that we would term as full sovereignty, sovereignty meaning they are only themselves, their energy is only their own. There is no external influence connected to them that's putting negative thoughts in their mind and causing negative emotional feelings. So this is the starting point. From there on in, that person needs to start to employ spiritual protection techniques, as we discussed, through meditation, changing the way they live, the things they think about, moving themselves into a more harmonious vibration. So basically bringing their vibration up away from that low level of fear and negativity. And as your vibration starts to increase, as you know well, my dear, better things start to happen in your life and you start to attract positivity in and positive people. So again, detaching from people around you that are negative is also an essential practice and technique. Because if you spend time with negative people that are engaging in substance abuse, that probably have attachments connected to them, then of course it's very difficult to move yourself into a positive place mentally whilst you're engaging with difficult negative personalities and peer groups.
Would you consider being authenticity as part of the problem? Because we raise to fit social requirements, family questions, ways of doing things. And we, from a young age, tend to say yes to things that are not really our way of doing things. So from my experience, it's kind of we lose part of ourselves in the saying yes to all these. And by that disconnection, we get lost and trapped.
Yes, it's a perfect way to articulate the answer to a certain degree. So everything we promote from a spiritual perspective, service to self first. I know most people promote service to others first, but we always promote service to self, because if you're leading your life authentically as you should be speaking your truth. If you're speaking your truth, you're making decisions that benefit you before other people. And that means that you're not in a position to be manipulated by other people, especially your family and your close friends. So if you started to say everything that you truthfully believe, if someone asks you if the clothing that they're wearing, for instance, looks nice, and you think, no, it looks horrific, it's a terrible choice, I personally wouldn't choose it, but it's probably right for you, then you can articulate an answer in that same way. You can say that for you, it's not your choice of clothing, you wouldn't wear it, but for them, as long as they're happy with it, then of course it's fine. So if we all started to speak our truth rather than say the things that society wants us to say, because of course everyone effectively is being manipulated by their social and cultural situations. So the people that you're with, the culture that you're part of, the social groups that you engage with, and obviously online, people are saying things that they don't believe, that effectively, essentially isn't true. And therefore, there is no service to self from that perspective.
Yes. What is the role of sense of humor in the work that you and your beautiful team do?
That's a lovely question, thank you. So as you can tell, hopefully, that my personality comes across. I'm able to basically possess this physical body that Andrew has possession of most of the time, and therefore I can orchestrate all of the actions. I can speak through his voice. And of course, the words that I say are a vibration. So things that I say to you hit your etheric field. if I say positive, truthful things to you, your heart center and chakra opens, and therefore you engage in the conversation, and you know with integrity the things that I'm saying you believe to be true, because they're said from my perspective with integrity and honesty and truth. So for me, having these conversations and teaching in the way that we do, I want things to be fun. People in a very difficult circumstances, the planet's in a very difficult place at the moment with the negative aspect trying to take hold. So having fun, having hilarity, having informal conversations just helps people to break down the barriers. And of course, as you know, my dear, if you laugh, you feel good. So if I can speak to you in a way that makes you laugh and we can have fun together talking, we can talk about some very intellectually in-depth subjects, but we don't have to do it in a boring, formal way. We can have fun and we can laugh, and that makes you feel better. And if you feel better, your vibration raises. And that's my core task here at this time on planet Earth's timeline, if you like, is to help to increase the vibration of the planet in a positive way. And the way that I've chosen to do that is to work with people that have negative attachments and low vibrating energy attached to them, holding their vibration down, so that every person that we clear, we remove that level of negativity, their vibration comes up. Then every footstep they take around their day, when they walk into town or into the shopping malls, every footstep they take on the planet, their vibrations come up. And then people that come along behind them that put their feet in the same footsteps, their vibration changes tiny, incrementally, but in a positive way. So if we can all start to raise our vibration in a positive way, then the planet's vibration comes up. And this is my agenda, and it's my project, if you like. And it will be done with fun.
I just love your project. It's mine as well. So it's that saying, when one heals, plenty heal, because the footprint, the imprint that that person leaves affects others, and you don't really need to know who the others are, and affects the place, and the place has life. Even if it's a shopping mall, maybe nature gets more radiant, but in a shopping mall, the place has life as well, right?
Yes, everything is alive on the planet. So the trees are alive, everything, the animals are alive. The planet has a life, has a vibration, and an intellectual consciousness of its own. So everything is living on the planet you're on. So every thought that you have and everything that you do affects other people, because you're all interconnected. And this is where, if we could get everybody on the planet to meditate at the same time on the same day, we could raise the vibration quite drastically. But of course, this is why the negative agenda continues to push negative news, because they want people in a negative place, being fearful of their life, fearful of their job, their economy. So fear is pushed out by the media to keep the vibration down of the planet, whilst we need people to effectively change their thought process and just move into that more positive space, because then you change everyone and everything around you.
Yes. One last question, if it may be. Would you give us a highlight of who were you when in a physical form? And you just said, I started to see Chen as a Chinese and all his pictures. And can you add something?
Yes, of course. So Andrew and I have this conversation quite often. So the personality that you engage with as Chen, and obviously you see here today is Chen, is a personality that I choose to project and connect with people, and obviously through Andrew, because of course all of us, all of you, all of us have had many past lives. So therefore you have different names, different personalities. You've all been different people. You've done different jobs. You've done different things. Many of you have actually had lives on other planets as well, not just on planet Earth. So effectively, I'm presenting myself to you as Chen. So my last life that we talk about was in the 1600s, and I lived in a very small provincial part of China. I had a wife, Ayana, and a child, 2 children, and I died very young at 34 years old. Because of course medicine and healthcare wasn't particularly good back in the 1600s. So at that time, I was very connected to nature, to the planet, and to herbs of choice. So this is the personality that I use effectively to do this work. But it's not really who I am particularly, but I don't wish to use, I didn't want Andrew to think that he was connected to some spiritual guru. When we connected, I wanted him to connect to a very humble personality that I use and call Chen. This is the personality of the person I had in those days, and this is the personality that I will be working on until such time that you all pass into spirit. So when you pass, my dear, and young Andrew passes back to spirit, I will be there to welcome you. You will see me.
We'll have a party.
Yes, we'll have a party. After you see me as Chen, I will then really show you my real personality. But for this lifetime, Chen is the person that I will be presenting as.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for all the teachings and all the wonderful, loving work that you and the team do for this planet.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to engage with your audience and connect with people. And obviously, from our perspective, we're here in truth, working with integrity to help all.
Thank you.
I'll pass you back to young Andrew as he's now here waiting in the wings. And I will say good day to you all.
Thank you. Hi. Welcome back.
Gizela?
Maybe you need a glass of water, no?
No, I'll just take a second just to kind of, just to feel back to normal. But the first thing I normally do actually is look at the time, because I don't have any recollection of time at all when Chen takes over.
So, we talked, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes?
Yeah, because quite often, like 2 hours have gone by. If he's talking to Jane, they'll sit on the sofa downstairs and they'll talk about things. And of course, I'd come back and think, oh, it's like 9 o'clock at night because they've had a 2 hour chat.
I wouldn't do that to you unless we had agreed on 2 hours with Chen. We'll do it next time.
Yeah, we can do that, actually. Yeah. So he was okay. He behaved, did he, I guess?
Sorry?
He behaved in the conversation, did he?
He always behaves. Always behaves. Yeah, and it was interesting because pretty much said kind of in the same lines that we were talking about. But I think for people that will listen to this recording, probably they will feel the vibration. They will feel it differently. If not immediately, gets in the back of their minds, right? And it's kind of a seed. I usually teach people, like, even if you have resistance, it's okay to have resistance. But because it's from a loving place, it's a truthful place, it's a place of authenticity and light and love, it keeps like in the back of your mind. It's a seed, and you water the seed whenever you want to, and the flower will show up because it's a very beautiful seed. So I think it's a very different way and energy to talk about these subjects that for plenty of people are scary and difficult to think of and to listen. And yeah, I appreciate you letting Chen talk to us.
No problem. I think you're exactly right. That people have to decide for themselves. I promote always that you don't go along with what other people say, and
yeah, sure.
recommend you make your own decisions based on your experience and what you truly believe. And when you listened, I listened to some of these podcasts of different people, and some of them I don't connect with, and I don't really agree with the content, and therefore I turn them off and I move on. And then I find some I really do like, and I think that's for me. The vibration's right, the content's correct. I'm happy to go along with that understanding until it changes. So I think we all need to be, consciously selective about the information that we allow ourselves to kind of be connected with, really.
Yes, what I was saying is like you started to have the events, you started to doubt yourself, and then Chen would say, let's work in this way, and you would want to go back to the old way. On some sort of level, there was the seed there so that you were ready to water it and embrace it, and now you're radiant doing this. It's like your path for this part of your life, right?
Yeah, and I wake up now every morning with a whole list of clearings to do, people to talk to. We're planning, obviously, this website's being built and the Spirit Release Academy with Jono. So I've got
Yeah.
more things. I've got more things to do now than I ever had before on my list. But I wake up like invigorated to get on with the work. Whereas I
Yes.
used to wake up with my normal job, my IT job. I used to drag myself out of bed, log in, go through the slog of the day. And by the time I went to bed at night, I hadn't actually enjoyed 1 minute of the day. Whereas now I go to bed at night, buzzing, thinking about the next day and the things we can do and the things that are coming. And wouldn't it be good if we did this and that? So, my vibration and my energy and my appetite for spiritual work has increased again dramatically, really.
Yes. Yes. What would be the last message that you want to send
So
to
for me, really, my kind of my message for people is to be true to yourself. Because if you're not true to yourself, you're not true to anybody, basically. So you have to be true to you, and you have to say and do the things that you believe is true. Everyone has a different concept and perception of truth. So two people aren't going to believe and do the same thing, but just follow your path and be true to you. And it changes your life, basically.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Andy. I hope we connect again, and 2 hours for Chen next time.
We can do that. I'm sure he'd like that.
Okay. So we'll talk about that in the future. And for you that are listening and watching us, engage with Andy and his work. We'll leave the details on the description. And see you next time in Gizela Infinite Love podcast. Thank you.